folks, let's start this off with a little bit of insight. I use Sunlu's ABS-like resin in my Saturn IV Ultra for most of my prints. I do also have a Saturn III Ultra, but either way, it's pretty cool to actually see how these printers work and how these prints come out that we're about to make. So after I got all the printing done and got it cleaned up and sanded down and all the other prerequisite things, I also primed that in black in this case, and in white in some other cases, as you'll see as we go along. But what I'm doing here is I'm actually taking some whites and grays and I'm dry brushing this piece of the base, which just has some stone and some like dirt and stuff. And I was going to try a trick here where I dry brushed the black to make some highlighted areas and then paint it with this Garrigex sewer, which is like a brownish color. And the idea was to maybe have the dry brushing pre-shade turn into like a highlight, and we would see like lighter browns and whatnot. But that Garrigex sewer was actually so dark and so thick that it actually covered it all up. So I decided to just use some earth from Ammo here, this diode dry brush paint, and I'm just using this here to create some more subtle highlights. So, because I didn't want it to be gray and black, I actually wanted it to be brown, because Polaris, whatever she's doing in this scene, she's essentially pulling something up out of the ground as if it's like metal or whatnot, because my understanding is that she can control metal kind of like her dad Magneto could. So anyway, this next piece, you can see what I'm doing is the part was primed in black, and then I'm just spraying down some metallics, and I am really loving my Ammo Atom metallic paints. They're really great. If you don't have the new Atom paints from Ammo, definitely check those out. And what you see I'm doing here is just trying to add some subtle shading with Nuln Oil. It's a very light shade from Citadel. Then the last thing I'm doing is taking this light metal. Again, this is the diode dry brush from Ammo that I'm using to just dry brush the edges. And what it does is it just makes the edges a little bit brighter, because this metal color specifically is just a very light, shiny metal color. And it's really nice. You guys have seen me use this in plenty of my older videos. Think like back with Lysel, I did this a lot. Special thank you to my patrons that support my work. If you're interested in daily vlogs, how-to videos, high-resolution photos, early access videos, discounts at my store, and free printable files, check out my Patreon and see how you can get exclusive access to all this extra content. With the base out of the way, we can turn our attention back to the main figure in this case, which is Polaris. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of zenithal highlight, but we're not going to make it too much of a zenithal, but in this case, especially on the top of her head, because her hair is kind of up in the air and she's got a lot going on. And we're going to be painting this figure green too, so keep that in mind. With Polaris being green, we're going to want a nice white base to paint on. So we're going to do a slight zenithal here on her body, just because she has this ginormous cape behind her, and you can see here how that looks, and it almost looks like she's swan diving there, doesn't it? I thought that was pretty cool. It's not often that I actually fully assemble the model before I paint it, but I did do that. So anyway, after the zenithal is done on her body, we can do it on her cape. Now this cape is massive. It is much bigger than the figure. You can see I'm actually using a clamp to be able to hold it so I can actually work it. Because anytime you have a cape like this, if I had my GK3 from Uniformation, which still isn't here yet, still isn't available, they're still shipping it at the time of me recording this, I would have been able to print this entire thing in one piece, but unfortunately I had to print it in 4 different pieces and then put it all together, which I spent an entire day just sanding this thing and filling the seams and whatnot, which I didn't record because it would have been really boring. But the point is, there's a lot of work to get to that point where I could actually paint it. So you saw what I did after I did a zenithal highlight. I painted the whole thing in a base coat of green, and then I shaded in a lighter green from the top, and then I'm going to actually come back and shade with a darker green from the bottom. I used AK's deep green there as the base coat, and then I think I just added some yellow into it to make a lighter coat. And then I used like Citadel's Orc Flesh, I think is the color, or some shade of green. I don't remember. It's a darker shade of green for the shadowed areas. Now, you don't have to zenithal to create that effect, but I just think it adds a more a more dramatic effect in the contrast. And remember, contrast is really what you want with a small model, because you want it to make it look more realistic. So anyway, moving on, I do have these fluorescents. I got these new fluorescent inks from Green Stuff World that I got shipped in, and I really do like these specifically for fluorescents, because I mentioned before on this channel when I've done countless fluorescents, think back when I did Spawn, I was using white ink with my fluorescent paints to kind of give them some more oomph, because there's not a lot of pigment in fluorescent paints, but this fluorescent ink was beautiful, and this is why I love fluorescents. You're going to see this a little bit later when I have the model finished, but I just love using fluorescents with special effects, because here's the thing. If I put LEDs in something, I gotta print in clear, I gotta run wiring and everything else, and the only time you see the special effect is when you have the light switch turned on. With fluorescents, it's just a UV light away from being, you know, a beautiful glow, and it's already really bright to begin with, so even without lights. But anyway, let's get back to what I'm doing here in the background, which is doing the skin tones. So my skin recipe, I'm still changing it now and then. I've been working quite a bit to perfect this recipe, because it's something that nobody else is using. I'm using specifically Atom by Ammo. I'm using their paints because these things spray like lacquers. They are an acrylic, but they spray as smooth as lacquers. So I'm constantly playing around with this technique, and you can see what I did here was I started with a base coat of pink, because it's very important to start with a base coat of pink, or else your skin will turn green. If you just use like a black or a white, it could turn a little green on you. So the pink helps keep your flesh tones warm. So after I did the pink, I did a base coat of like a warm flesh color, and then I'm working my way up to the highlight flesh tones, which are just like a light skin. I will have the recipe for you here eventually on the screen, but this is a recipe that you won't find on any other channel. You'll find others like it, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I've invented a new way of doing it. I've just found a better product that I like, and I've changed it up quite a bit from what I've done even just a few months ago, and I've actually changed it since I made this video, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But essentially, I wanted to make sure that my skin tones stay warm, so as to avoid any kind of like greening or like green color or too pink too. So that's one thing you can struggle with, is if you don't cover up that pink too well, what you'll get is a pink looking character. It almost looks like they just got birthed or something, like really, really pink skin. But anyway, you can see there from left to right, that's how I painted this model. Starting with the pink, then to the warm skin. And the beige pink is a real trick, by the way. That beige pink is a great shadow color. But anyway, we'll definitely talk more about that in future videos, so definitely make sure you come back, because I have so much more to talk about with skin tones. And also, if you want to go back and see how I did Poison Ivy, she's another great reference for you, because she's almost all skin tones and just a little bit of leaves, so definitely check that out. But anyway, back to the green that we're painting here on Polaris. So she has a couple different shades of green here, so you can see her central part here. I used that same deep green as I used in the base coat of her cape. And what you see, that black stuff is a masking putty. You see it in the background there. I used it for camouflaging tanks way back in the day. I used it for just painting camouflage on German tanks, but it works really well here too. And other people would say, well, you just use silly putty. Yeah, I didn't have silly putty, I have masking putty. Either way, this stuff works really great for figures, because unlike tape, you don't have to worry about the straight edge. This thing can be molded and formed however you'd like. The only caveat is you have to spray your paint and then pull it off pretty quickly, because it likes to run and ooze, because it's like silly putty. But anyway, what I did here was I mixed a dark green with some different paints. Again, I really don't remember what I used here. I think I used like a dark green from Ammo, another Atom paint, because they are my favorite. And I just remember adding some like black into it just to make it a dark green. And I specifically shaded that in the areas where she was dark green, and also in the shadowed areas. And then the last thing I did was spray a few highlights from up above. And you can see there's plenty of different green contrasts there. Now, it was at this point I wanted to try out these new Pro Acryls. So I've been hearing a lot about this in the community, specifically for folks that do miniatures and brush painting. And I will concur after using just the black. I think I just started with the black and the white because that's what I do a lot of brush detail painting with. And they flow off the brush really, really well, and I definitely recommend the Monument Hobbies. Specifically for brush painting, I have not tried to airbrush them, so I don't know if they're any good for that, but so far I really like them. Now, I wanted to break out my AK markers again. Now, these are actually like they are a marker, but the paint in here is almost like an enamel. It comes out, it's very shiny, this gold. And if you need something that's supposed to look like gold leaf, it can be very difficult to do that with any other kind of acrylic paints. I mean, the Atom Ammo paints, they're very, very nice. Their gold is really nice. You don't have the fleck in it, so it looks really good. But it's not as shiny. It's bright, but not as shiny. This gold from AK in their pen, or marker, I should say, it's very bright gold, very shiny right out the gate. So after I got all like the black details down and the gold details down, then I did come back and paint her fingernails. Now, one thing I should note is all the areas that I painted gold, I did paint black first. So all the trim work was done in black, and then the gold was done over top of the black. And I wanted to accentuate some of these lines on her suit, so I actually went through with black paint and like a zero brush here, and just went through and just essentially highlighted them. I thought about doing a wash, but washes can get messy. Although there is a nice channel here, I wanted something to be definitively black and really show up even better than a wash. So with that part done, we can put her body onto the cape, and it snaps into place really, really nicely, because this is a very beautifully and well-fitting design from Abe3D. And the only thing left we have to do is her head. It does look pretty good with the little powers there on her hand too, and you can see how those fluorescents are almost glowing just sitting there. If you're a collector or an artist, check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com, where you can browse a growing library of over 400 models to choose from. I'd love the opportunity to print and paint a model to add to your collection. Unpainted kits are also available for purchase. For commission requests, send an email to relentlessstorm7@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to work with you. Be sure to use code STORMYT2024 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. I also have listings on eBay and Etsy, but my entire library can only be found on my Shopify site, relentlessstormmodels.com. Now let's get back to that head. So just as we did on her arms and the other parts of her suit, I'm going to paint the areas that are going to be gold in black first, and I'm using that same Pro Acryl black, and it does come out really nice, and it does dry to a nice matte finish. It's really, really, really nice, really easy to work with. I would say it's the closest thing that I've found so far to Vallejo's black in terms of how easy it is to paint on there. And you don't have to thin it right out the bottle, which is kind of nice, but I do find that even on a wet palette, after maybe 15-20 minutes of use, you do have to add some water to it, so you still need to dilute it just a little bit, but it's really, really nice. It flows really nice off the brush. I actually really prefer using it when I'm painting eyes too, because it does flow so well to do like the small parts of the eye, like the pupil and the iris. It works really well. So anyway, here's that same concoction I put together earlier, the dark green for her suit. So we have the same dark green around her neck here, and I'm just brush painting this on. And it did take a couple coats to make sure I covered up all them skin tones. So I got to use another paint marker. It's not really a marker though, how it works, but it's very similar because it's like an enamel that comes out of it, like I mentioned. So this is the same as the gold, but this is chrome. So it's not one of the new AK real color markers. This is the metallic markers that have been out for quite some time by AK. And I wanted to try this because Polaris's helmet is a metallic green, and metallic green isn't a very common color that you find. So one way to do that is to create a metallic background, and then you paint like a transparent green over top, which is what you're going to see me do here. I did this back on Eve a while ago when I did Eve from Stellar Blade. I did a very similar trick, but I used AK's chrome airbrush paint. In this case, I decided to use the marker. And I will say, for the details, it's really nice. That chrome marker is really beautiful. It's so shiny, because again, it's like an enamel that's coming out of there. It is a very shiny paint, and it dries very hard. It's really nice to work with. And then this Corandris green from Citadel went over top of that really well to give us that metallic green look. Now, with the bigger stuff out of the way, we can focus on the small details like her eyebrows, which I'm just using the same black as I did earlier. And as I said, I can use a really fine brush and it flows really nicely off of my paintbrush, which for me, the ability for your paint to flow off of a really tiny paintbrush like this is really important for getting details. Because a lot of times you'll struggle with having a small brush where it doesn't hold any paint, and either the paint dries so quickly inside of your brush and just turns into a clump, or it's so watery that it runs down your model. So we don't want either one of those. So again, it's really nice, and these Pro Acryls do a great job of flowing from the brush. That's why I've really grown to like them. So much so that I did buy the entire base set of colors. So they're not exactly the cheapest though. I will say that they are quite expensive, but if you're looking for a way to maybe get into them, to try them out, I'd highly recommend getting like the black, the white, and maybe ivory for like doing eyes balls and stuff. So like the basic colors maybe, because I'd highly recommend the Pro Acryls for eyes. Maybe you want to get the eye colors too, you know, like green and blue, things like that, brown. Anyway, enough about that. I don't want to just talk about all the great paints there are all day long. I just want you to know what products are out there, because, you know, I see so many people that come into the hobby and they buy their paints at Walmart and expect them to have a masterpiece of a result. Well, it all depends on the quality of the tools and the quality of your paints that you use. So anyway, what you see in the background, I did use ivory in her eyes, and then I take this like that dark nude pink. I started even using a vintage pink from Adam Ammo Paints, and I put it in the corners or the edges of her eyes. That's like the fleshy part of the eyes. And here what you can see I'm doing is I'm outlining the iris. She's kind of like looking up, so we only have part of her eye that we're able to see, I should say her iris that we're able to see. We're able to see like the bottom part of it. So a nice trick to just give yourself a shape is to start with just a black outline before you start painting in your colors. So again, we can only see part of her eye, her iris. I should keep saying eye, her iris, which technically we can only see part of any character's eye, because if we saw the whole thing, it might be a little weird. But you can see again, I'm just painting in that black part to make sure I have a shape. Now this is 1/6 scale, but her eyes are barely open, and that does make it a little bit of a challenge for showing pupils at the right size and making sure you get the right shape, because you're trying to draw a part of a circle with a flat top and bottom, so it can be a little difficult. And that's why you definitely want a small brush. I'm using a single zero here. This is a Kolinsky sable brush. Now if you can get yourself like a 00, that would probably be okay. Honestly, to go much further below that, you might also just pluck a hair out of your eyebrow and try to shove it in a brush, because there's just not much to it and it doesn't hold a lot of paint. I'm not saying you can't use them, but I haven't had much luck with anything under a 00 for it actually doing anything useful for me. So anyway, after I laid out the area for the irises, what I'm doing next is I'm painting in different shades of green. And if you ever look at someone's eyes, you know, look at your friend or, you know, a family member, spouse, just look them in the eye closely in the light, and, you know, try not to weird them out when you do it, but look at their eyes and see the different colors, like green eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes. They're not just one solid color. There's different shades in there, and that's what you want to do when you paint your eyes. Paint in a couple different colors, start with dark and work your way lighter, especially lighter as you go down further on their eye. In this last step, and you'll take notice when you look in their eyes, there's always a reflection of whatever light's nearby, because the eyes are glossy. So you put a little white speck on one side of their pupil, and that's really a nice piece. It just brings it to life a little bit more too. Now after I have the eyes done, I'm working on the lips, and in this case A color that I'm using a lot lately is like a carmine red, and I think this might be AK's that I'm using at the time, because it does look like the AK Carmine, so AK 3rd Gen. So it's a it's a darkish red color, but I think it looks good for like a female who's has lipstick on. It's just a really nice color. And all I did was I lightened it up with some, standard red, and just added in a little bit of shade to it, so there's a little bit more color there to look at. And I think that face turned out pretty good for the size of this model. I will say, if you really want to practice portraits, I would recommend you look at like 1/4 scale, or maybe even bigger if you can get away with it. But this last step you see me doing here is me adding in a gloss clear coat over the eyes and the lips, and that really, really brings it to life. With the head painted, we can put it in place, and then we're going to do just a little bit of OSL. So you guys have seen me do this way back on Magic a while ago, a lot, and I did it on Spawn as well, where I'm just basically using wherever the power is or wherever the point of light is, and I'm pretending like I'm projecting light off of it with my airbrush and spraying fluorescence all over. And here you can see what that effect looks like with a UV light and dimmed lights in my studio. Looks really cool. If you like what you saw today, please remember to hit that like button. Leave me a comment if you have any questions, or maybe you just want to tell me how cool this looks, or maybe you're interested in a model. Check out my Patreon for daily vlogs and other updates. And also, if you're looking for a kit to paint for yourself, or maybe you want me to commission one for you, go ahead and check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com.